a difference in that regard.
Okay, and she mentioned an issue there of cost on her side of the coin. Well, is it fair to ask, what do you charge for a woman who wants to be artificially inseminated?
Typically the charge, it depends upon how much monitoring there is being done by the physicians too. Whether in other words, you can envision a situation where the patient is undergoing an insemination in a natural cycle, so she's only going to ovulate one egg that particular cycle. Or there are situations where you can stimulate the patient and coax the ovary into producing more than one oocyte, so you increase the odds of a successful fertilization. You obviously increase the odds of having a multiple pregnancy. So one has to be very careful in monitoring the cycle of the patient and perhaps stimulating so that you get 2 or 3 oocytes or eggs as a possibility and not many more than that. So that would impact the cost level to the patient because of that monitoring. So we're looking at probably on the order of, without stimulation in a natural cycle, perhaps a total cost of $500, which would include maybe $100 and $150 for the sperm sample and the participation of the sperm bank, and the rest of that fee then would go to compensate the physician for their time.
Okay.
If you add ovarian stimulation to that, you're going to perhaps as much as double the cost per cycle.
When a client comes in, client, patient, both, either way, right? When a client comes in or a patient comes in and starts consulting with a physician and so on, is this an expense that they normally bear themselves, or is there insurance that covers this?
It's very dependent upon the patient and the insurance coverage that that patient has. But by and large, if you look at most programs, they will provide limited coverage. They will provide coverage, for instance, for monitoring a cycle, but very frequently they will not cover the cost of the sperm sample, for instance.
Okay.
So it really is. You can find different combinations all over the map.
On the other side of the gender ledger, if a guy had a wife or a lady friend that was not fertile, can he buy an egg from the facility and use his sperm for the egg that he purchases from your sperm bank or egg bank,
or his own sperm?
Use his own sperm for a purchased egg. Say I come down and I say, I want to buy an egg, doctor.
The technology it's exciting that the technology has changed so fast that in fact that is possible. We now have patients who are participating in the in vitro fertilization program where the problem may be predominantly in ovulation, for instance, on the female side. That patient or that couple can engage the participation of an oocyte donor, of an egg donor. Now, it's not exactly analogous because we don't freeze eggs. But eggs could be collected from that oocyte donor, inseminated with husband sperm or donor sperm, produce an embryo, and the embryo could be then transferred to the patient.
Is it impossible to freeze an egg? Or
the recipes that we have right now do not work well on eggs. They work very well on embryos. But there are some changes in the properties of when we go from an egg to an embryo, so that we're not highly successful in freezing eggs.
Ken has stepped up to the microphone, and apparently Ken has a question. Can we put the camera on Ken there real quick? Ken, what's your question of the doctor?
Well, I have a question that has two sides to it. One is, would be something at the facility, and then one would be also a legal question. And several years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, there was a case of a young man who wanted to have visitation rights with the child that was produced from his sperm. And then he eventually moved in next door to where this child was living, and eventually he wanted to get more and more visitation rights and get to become a legal parent of this child. And is there, I guess the question would be, is there a release form that the donor must sign, number one, and number two, can they break that agreement if there is one, and then eventually cause problems for the mother in a sense that she really would never have expected them?
Ken, thank you very much for the question. Did you get, are you?
I think I can respond to that. We do provide sperm banking facilities for what we would call known donor situations, where a couple may come in, the male has an infertility problem, and his brother could participate as the sperm donor in situations like, so that would be one set of circumstances where clearly there would be a relationship between the sperm donor and the child that was created and is being raised by, in this case, the brother and sister-in-law. In the anonymous donor situation, you would first of all have to assume that the anonymous donor has found out which child was his and go from there. I mean, we maintain anonymity amongst donors, so I'm not sure that I can respond to that question except to say that in theory it shouldn't happen.
I see.
Okay.
I have one more kind of a corollary to the question, and that would be, in the event of the brother being a sperm donor, is it necessary for the family to keep records of that for a certain number of years or maybe generations so that there are no problems that result from inbreeding?
Thanks, Ken.
No, I mean, you would still be in a situation where you wouldn't have inbreeding, because you would have the sister-in-law would be the person that was producing the oocyte or the egg and being inseminated. So you're not having a situation where you have inbreeding. It's up to the couple whether they want to maintain records in that particular case. We wouldn't. What we would, as a sperm bank, what we would require is that even though that sperm donor may be a known sperm donor to a known individual to the couple, we would still mandate that that sperm be obtained and quarantined. So in other words, that donor is quarantined and proven to be HIV and hepatitis C negative before we'd release the sample, or else the couple has to sign a release indicating that they know what the risks are and they're willing to assume those risks.
Okay. Again, Ken, thank you very much. You know, something occurred to me as you were talking and answering the questions there. And this may be really confusing. If a woman became pregnant and wanted to terminate the pregnancy, are you, as a sperm bank and also a storage facility for fertilized eggs, right? Are you an option for a woman who wishes to say, well, I don't want this one now and I may not want it in the future. However, doctor, I'm going to give it to you and you can set it on the shelf there and keep it for a while? No,
not once implantation has occurred, then you're not really in a position where you can recover that developing fetus and cryopreserve it. Is that what you mean?
Well, if you recover it in well, I guess the question comes up because you were talking about when you, in another example where a woman came in and you were able to have her produce multiple eggs,
mm-hmm.
and you could have sperm available to inseminate all of them. Well, if a woman comes in with one, then she's already completed this deed through normal natural process, and ask you within the first week or so to extract that and put it on ice, it would appear to me that that would be a logical thing to do.
I can give you an example of how that's been done. Several years ago, some people that were interested in the development of this technology and basically took on a project where they were recruiting oocyte donors.
Mm-hmm.
They were allowing those oocyte donors to ovulate normally. They were inseminating them with the sperm from the infertile couple,
mm-hmm.
and then they were recovering the embryos from the uterus. So they were waiting several days mm-hmm. after the insemination occurred, and then recovering embryos. The embryos would then be transferred to the wife of the infertile couple. You could also freeze them.
Sure.
So it's all a matter of time. If you recover those embryos before they implant in the uterus, in other words, they're basically free floating in the uterus,
mm-hmm.
and you can do that for several days after fertilization occurs, perhaps for up to a week, then you're right, you could.
With your question, you don't need to identify yourself.
All right.
Bruce must be next.
Well, maybe so. I wanted to ask Dr. Wolf, he was talking about that they had a counselor for women, and I know that for men it's extremely difficult to accept being the factor in a couple's infertility, and also there's a lot of questions about whether they're going to tell the family and their friends about where this baby came from, especially if they've made any sort of diagnosis public. Can he recommend some resources for men who are dealing with the emotional aspect of infertility, or is there some sort of support group for men?
I would start with making a reference to an organization called Resolve, which has it's a national organization, but also has a local branch or chapter. And I think you would find many different sources of support through that organization.
Do you have a number on the tip of your tongue?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Are they in the phone book as Resolve?
They should be.
They are.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Apparently, are you involved with that group?
I'm familiar with them. I'm more active on a computer bulletin board that has a support group for infertility. But I'm very active, but my husband, like many men, is a little bit more reluctant to be quite as public about our situation. So.
Well, if you're active on a BBS, and someone might be listening, how would they find the resource on the bulletin board?
Well, almost every major bulletin board has something along those lines. I'm active on Prodigy. I know that America Online has one.
What do they look for?
They can go in and ask the board manager if there's an infertility section, and they'll find people, both male and female, that are discussing different medical aspects. That's how I found my RE.
Okay. Well, let me thank you very much for the call.
Thank you.
You are watching the DADS Television Network. We are doing excerpts from programs dealing with men's health. Next, Dr. Lyndon Smith. We've done 2 programs or more with Dr. Lyndon Smith. One that comes to mind, circumcision. Another one, general health. Dr. Lyndon Smith.
Circumcision is a surgical procedure performed without anesthesia on 9 out of every 10 newborn American males within the first few days after birth. During the past year, 1 1/4 million Americans underwent this surgery. No other country routinely circumcises their boys except where this operation is a religious ritual or puberty rite. Circumcision began in the United States during the late 1800s and was considered a welcome alternative to corporal punishment, physical restraint, and urethral cauterization, all measures taken to prevent masturbation. At that time, masturbation was believed to cause a wide variety of diseases, from syphilis and polio to madness and death. As medicine became more advanced and causes of and treatments for these diseases were discovered, the rationale for circumcision was narrowed to 3 medical reasons. 1. Hygiene. Good personal hygiene offers all the advantages of circumcision without the risks of surgery. 75% of the world's male population is not circumcised, and less than 0.5% of these uncircumcised males require circumcision as adults. In those instances where a problem does arise, equal or greater benefit may be gained by non-surgical therapy. Circumcision is not necessary to maintain adequate hygiene. 2. Cancer. Fears of penile and cervical cancer were stimulated by inaccurate studies. There is no medical proof of a link between cancer and circumcision. 3. Phimosis. Phimosis is a condition in which the foreskin is too tight to pull back over the head of the penis. However, an unretractable foreskin is normal in infancy, and 95% of uncircumcised males will have a fully retractable foreskin by the age of 18. Therefore, the foreskin should never be forced back over the glands. An unretractable foreskin cannot be diagnosed in infancy.
Okay, now we ran a little bit of information there about circumcision, showing how the baby is strapped down, showing just various steps and some reasons. Any comments, gentlemen?
Well, it's brutal.
It is. It's brutal torture. It's child abuse in a true form. Any dictionary definition of torture would indicate an individual being unable to defend themselves or free themselves from the situation, and that's what happens to 3,000 male infants a day in this country.